Thank you, Phoebe, for the introductions. And thank you so much, Paula, for joining me today. It's great to see you.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
So, I know recently you worked on a report with the Rockefeller Foundation called Reset the Table. But before we dive into the report, I'm wondering if you could just share a bit about your motivation and journey to doing work in food systems. Food is
Mm,
something everyone can relate to, and because food is connected to many different parts of everyday life, from the history of a place to your community of people to transportation and climate. I'm always curious about not only who ends up working on issues related to the food system, but how they got there. So, what's brought
mhm.
you to this point? What's your story?
Well, there are a number of key influences on why I got involved in food policy. One, I'm from Hawaii. Two, I was involved in environmental water policy in the state of California. And three, I was a senior official for the Mayor Viragos of Los Angeles. So those three pieces came together in this way. I am part Hawaiian, and my family history in Hawaii went back before the overthrow of the Kingdom of Hawaii in 1893, and it was overthrown for the sake of sugar, of producing more sugar to trade with the United States. So Hawaii's economy became completely subsumed to monoculture agriculture. And the lasting impact that had, not only on the economy, but on labor and on the environment in Hawaii, is something that I grew up knowing. I became involved in environmental water policy and served on the California Bay Delta Authority board as an appointee of the governor. And that gave me a firsthand look at irrigated agriculture in Central Valley and the influences on agriculture there. Being a senior official also with Mayor Virgosa of Los Angeles, we had the opportunity to and did feel that we should be responsible to our local regional food economy, that we should be responsible to our rural neighbors who are producing food, and that we should take a role in helping to create a food system that supported local economy and its diverse array of actors, that supported community health and supported the environment in sustainability and climate smart agricultural practices. So that's what we set about to do, and that's how I got involved.
Yeah, so you're certainly getting at the importance of an integrated nutrition security system, which is one of the fundamental shifts that's highlighted in the report. So I'd like to just switch over and turn to the report and talk about that a little bit more. That you worked on with a panel of experts that was brought together by the Rockefeller Foundation. The report's called Reset the Table, Meeting the Moment to Transform the U.S. Food System. And so the first shift is about going from this siloed food access programs to an integrated nutrition security system, which you've touched on. And I wonder if you could just speak a little bit more about that. Where do you see the greatest opportunity in terms of working toward an integrated nutrition security system? Or on the flip side,
Mm.
where have you observed a lack of integration?
Well, for one, we have disaggregated the ability to grow food from where people live. So in the past, many people had victory gardens in their homes during World War II, in particular, when food resources were scarce, but they were able to grow their own food. And at that time, the lowest income populations actually had better health than they do now. They were proportionally better health. Um, so I think if we are able to reintegrate the ability to grow your own food into all areas where there's housing, that might restore a certain degree of not only pleasure, because it's very pleasurable to garden and to grow your own food, but health, because the food that you're going to grow for yourself will almost by definition be healthy. It's not going to be processed, it'll be healthy. And it will also
Mhm.
restore an important degree of dignity to people to be able to provide for themselves in that way. In other respects, though, we do have a greater need, I think, to coordinate our nutrition systems with school districts. So school districts were quite heroic during this time, food banks and school districts, but school districts in particular pivoted from going to a cafeteria style system where they would feed their enrolled students and would get reimbursed the next year for what they had served the year before, to just serving food and getting it out to the population, the students and their families, at great risk to their own budgets. But they did it because they were a public serving institution. So they, along with food banks, did quite a bit. But we need to do more to support the school districts in their ability to be anchors of community health and feeding. They, after all, are serving our children. They're serving the kindergarten through 12th grade population, and they have through those children also have access to be able to serve their families. So if we were to
Mm,
support school districts more in their effort to provide nutritious, healthy, sustainably grown and fairly produced food to their student population, but also to be able to serve as emergency response centers and
mm.
have the ability to be nimble in a situation like this one that we're experiencing now, I think we'd go a long way toward making a step to integrating nutrition across the areas where our country's currently providing it. And SNAP,
Mhm.
it should be more available in many locations as well.
Absolutely. And I think the ability to grow your own food also highlights the need for access to land, which you've talked about,
Mm-hmm.
and really enabling and supporting that agency in the food system. And
Mm-hmm.
I think part of that is also touches on the importance of infrastructures, and which brings me to shift number two. Um, that the report discusses going from hyper specialized, vertically integrated supply chains to reinvigorated regional systems.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that this is something that you and the Center for Good Food Purchasing really spend a lot of time focusing on. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the center and your work around strengthening regional food supply chains.
Yeah, the Center for Good Food Purchasing was founded with the Good Food Purchasing Program at its core. And the Good Food Purchasing Program works with major institutions that have large food service budgets, to provide them a feedback tool on how they're doing in their purchasing in 5 value categories. So the 5 value categories are support of local economies, fair labor, environmental sustainability, animal welfare, and nutritional health. So we have a metric-based system as well as a tiered ranking system that uses existing certifications such as organic or fair labor certified or Equitable Food Initiative certified, Seafood Watch, all the known rating
Mm,
systems that are there already. We have a collection of those, and we get the food purchasing information from the school districts and then uh, rank how they're doing and give them feedback on how they're doing. So the idea with this is to bring awareness to the school districts, or we also work in municipal institutions such as jails, recreation and park centers, departments of aging, entertainment venues that are owned by municipalities and hospitals and so forth. So whichever institution is enrolled in the program will have information on how they're doing in those categories and can set their own targets for how they want to do better. So we now have 20 cities around the country, and 53 institutions are enrolled in this program, including LA, Chicago, New York, Boston, DC public schools, etc. And we're very proud of all the enrollees. The point of it is to create a demand signal for the regional food economy. And we work with institutions to help them improve their purchasing as well as the relationships along the supply chain. What's needed? And what I think is this moment is built for, this opportunity, is an investment in the supply chain piece. So we're building the market
mm,
signals. There are producers out there, producers meaning farmers, ranchers, etc., who are growing the food. The most opaque part of the system, the most difficult to reach, and the one that's privately and economically driven, it's a private economic system, is the distribution system. And it's the supply chain intermediaries, is what we'd call it, that are what was disrupted during the pandemic, difficult to find and sort out. Those broken supply chains had to be reworked. What we saw was that in the most centralized systems and the highly consolidated systems, there were real problems, such as in meat, which has 4 companies that own most of the meat in the United States. So it's highly consolidated. And we saw that the meat processing, for example, was consolidated into just a few meat processing plants. A long time ago, they were very localized meat processing plants, but now it's highly centralized. So when you have a disruption in the system, such as, supply chain disruptions, but also a health problem or outbreak, that makes you more fragile. It's a more vulnerable system, actually. It may have economies of scale, but it doesn't have built-in resilience. So having local processing and local infrastructure, local processing for meat, grains, produce, local infrastructure for mission-driven distribution, meaning, source from local farmers and supply to areas that deserve more equitable access, will make a big difference in our regional food system.
So the Center for Good Food Purchasing is essentially building an infrastructure and working with institutions to build up this local and regional food economy along that food supply chain, creating opportunities for perhaps communities who've been excluded from the food supply chain, specifically BIPOC communities, and creating opportunities for agency in the food system.
That's exactly right. So we're building
Mhm.
demand, which is very key. So we're building economic demand and sending market signals for that. We're advocating for local supply chain infrastructure. All of the demand that we're building creates opportunities for the local farmers, including BIPOC communities in particular.
So I think one of the greatest strengths of this is that it's really showing that there's more value in the food system, but in addition to not just focusing on the economic profits, right? Which gets to the fundamental shift number 3 that's highlighted in the report about going from maximizing profits to really intentional investment, equity, and shared prosperity throughout the supply chain. And I know
Mhm.
you've been working on true cost accounting, and I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what is true cost accounting and why is that important for the food system?
The idea of true cost accounting in food is to shine a light on what are now the hidden externalities of food. So, as an example, in a hamburger, you have the part of a cow, which is very expensive to raise, and a big animal, but hamburger can sell for $1.99 for a hamburger. But what that has within it is a number of hidden supports, like subsidies for water, tax breaks, economies of scale, but it also has the externalities of the health impacts of eating hamburgers. So it's not borne in the cost of the hamburger, but it's borne by society when you have a lot of people who have health impacts from eating that kind of food. Same is true for sugar. So with sugary beverages, as an example, those are relatively cheap when you think about all the ingredients that are in them, but the sugar in the sugary beverage creates a lot of health impacts, diabetes, obesity. Society bears those costs. The consumer who buys the soda doesn't. As by contrast, if you buy, say, an organic apple, it might go for $1.99 a pound, which is the same cost of that hamburger. The $1.99 a pound is for a healthy product, but it's also for, say, an organic apple, which doesn't use pesticides, doesn't cause harm to the environment. So you have a whole system in that apple, which is bearing its true cost. So that kind of reflection of what the true cost of food is needs to be brought forward, needs to be made more transparent, and needs to be embedded into purchasing decisions. We can embed them in the purchasing of school districts, which we are doing with our program. We can embed them in regulatory decision making. We can embed it in international trade agreements and so forth. But incorporating more of a true cost idea into our purchasing practices overall will be valuable as a society going forward.
Yeah, and I think the importance of true cost accounting has been further reinforced by the challenges and lessons we've learned from the pandemic. And this pandemic has certainly highlighted cracks in the food system at all scales, from local to global. And we've talked through the fundamental shifts, 3 shifts that are necessary to transform the food system in the US. But as you know, the US food system is also connected to a global food supply chain that also comes with implications around equity, shared prosperity, public health, and especially environmental sustainability. And so working toward that transformation, while certainly very necessary, I think can feel quite daunting in some ways. And so I'm wondering if you can help break that down a little bit. Can you talk about how local to global transformation happens? And is that possible with the food system?
I do think there's precedent for making change in what might otherwise seem to be an entrenched and intractable system. We have a precedent in our energy system. In the 20th century, we had a monolithic structure for energy, which was oil-based, petroleum-based, fossil fuel-based. And there were attempts to break through that in the 1970s, but they didn't work as well on the federal level as they did when it finally got to the local level in the 21st century. And there were goals set by regions around the world, by states, by cities, for their mix of renewable energy. So an example is in Los Angeles, where we had a goal of 20% renewable energy by 2020 and came up with our own mix of energy that would be appropriate for the Los Angeles area. Many other states and cities did the same thing. With that happening on the local level, we saw an aggregate shift around the world in renewable energy so that now it's a huge provider of jobs. There's lots of solar power out there, lots of solar technology, lots of wind technology that is actually good for the economy as well as it is good for the environment. With that as an example, I think we can do the same in the food system, particularly as we support our regional food systems so that we can create regional food systems that have a target similar to our renewable target, say 20-30% target for regional food systems that support community health, that support local smaller businesses and local businesses, that support fair labor, that support environmental sustainability and climate resilience. And with that, I think we can make a big difference in the world.
Well, thank you, Paul. I think that's a great note to end on. Thank you for leaving us with some light that is shining through those cracks, so to speak.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.